how much does multitasking affect your CPU/GPU comparisons? Nowadays, people are gaming while streaming and or watching videos on multiple monitors, and I'm curious to what extent all those tasks affect the overall experience. More cores tend to mean better multitasking performance, but have you tried putting a 12th gen Intel with P&E cores against AMD in such a scenario? A 6-core may be just fine for gaming, but at what point should buyers look at a higher core count CPU? How much does the GPU play a part? Okay, so this is one that we do see quite often, this type of comment when we do, I think most recently, the 5600 versus the 5700X, so 6 cores versus 8 cores. And a lot of people point to, you're using a skeleton crew of applications. It's a clean test system, so therefore it's not really real world, which is a misconception. That's not really true. Basically, our test systems are set up how you should set up your regular gaming PC. So we have a huge amount of applications installed and probably more software running in the background than certainly more than what I would have on my gaming system. There's diagnostic software. We have, often I'll have Steam, Uplay, Origin that open. I try to close those to keep it all, as clean as possible, but they're still installed. And again, when you're gaming, you probably shouldn't have every single application you have installed open. So how real world it is, I guess, depends on how messy you are with your computer. As for having things like YouTube videos playing while you game, that's an interesting scenario because I know based on, we've polled this before with our audience and a lot of you do it. A lot of you think those who do it are absolutely bonkers, which I sort of fall into that category. But of course, there are a wide range of gamers. Tim and I, for example, are quite different the way we approach gaming and the gaming we play. And I think that feeds into it as well. So I know I'm getting a little derailed here, but if you watch YouTube videos while you're gaming, to me, that suggests that you're more of a casual gamer, without question. And it's not necessarily a really fast-paced game. For example, like StarCraft 2, a real-time strategy game. You can't really be watching a video while playing. That's pretty fast and furious, that type of game. Call of Duty Warzone, you're not really watching a cooking show while you're trying to stay alive in a battle royale. And you're also not wanting to hear a video because you're wanting to hear footsteps and things around you because that gives you a significant advantage. So again, I think people who are watching YouTube while gaming are playing more casual games. I don't know, maybe Assassin's Creed. Do you agree?
I would say that's probably the case. I'm not someone that watches YouTube videos while gaming either, but we're probably going to get comments now being like, I play StarCraft and watch YouTube videos at the same time, right?
Well, I guess there are casual people who, you can play StarCraft single player, but I used to play quite competitive StarCraft, and there is no way you're in the higher leagues watching a YouTube video while playing. At least that's my opinion. I find it very hard to believe that anyone's doing that. So where I'm going with this, why I'm making this comparison when we're talking about 6 cores versus 8 cores, is because, and again, cores aren't cores, it's about CPU performance. But if you're more of a casual gamer, you're listening to a video, you're playing a game, you're doing that because you like going about that way, you're probably not that fixated on frame rate, high performance. So how much does that matter? Whereas if you're someone who's playing CSGO, Warzone, Fortnite, a game where you want as many frames per second as possible, you will care about micro stuttering. You will care about your frame rate dipping a little bit because you want the most performance possible. But in those scenarios, you're not watching a YouTube video. So it's kind of like people are giving an example of something somebody might do, but then how much does it apply to the situation where we're talking about it's all about performance?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess still for those casual gamers, you still would want, if you're given a choice between 2 parts, and one, you're playing your YouTube video and that causes a 5 FPS drop, and on a different CPU, you're getting a 10 FPS drop, or maybe vice versa, the YouTube video doesn't play back as smoothly, or whatever the case is, I think for a casual gamer, you still would want the better experience, but I guess what you're trying to say or lead towards is, does it matter that much?
Does it matter that much, and is it worth paying twice as much in a hypothetical example to avoid that small, do you care if you're playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey at 90 frames per second or 85 frames per second?
Probably not.
I'm asking you because...
Probably not that much.
No. So that's where I'm coming at with that one. So that's sort of tackling the video playing sort of thing. But again, yeah, sure, I could do some benchmarks, and I probably will. It's something I've been thinking about doing pretty much for this whole year, and I do have a bit of time available now. So, but again, you can sort of work this out with your current system by playing, say, a 4K YouTube video, just having a look at your CPU utilization, because this leads into the next misconception, is that, and I know there are some people that are thought to be authorities on this subject, and they've said that background tasks and yada, 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 and that's why they've pushed E-cores. People seem to think that you need a core for Discord, a core for this, a core for that, and it's like, define what a core is anyway. But it's CPU cycles. And if you open up Discord, have a chat with 6 mates, have a YouTube video playing, have Steam open in the background, whatever else it may be, those sort of light applications, you're going to see very, very small CPU usage on a modern 6-core CPU. So like a 12600K, which is kind of a 10-core CPU sort of. Maybe the Ryzen 5 5600 is a better example. You'll see very low utilization.
Yep.
So unless your game is utilizing the CPU to the tune of like 95%, there's going to be very little difference there between that part and an 8-core part. The 8-core parts are definitely better. They're definitely faster. But whether you want to spend the $150 or whatever it is to get that is up to you. That's why we provide all the information, because there's no right or wrong answer. It's not all gamers are okay with a 6-core. It's not all gamers need an 8-core. And again, I prefer to give specific examples because I really hate talking in cores, because it's kind of a bit silly, because you could be talking about literally any level of performance. So not all gamers are okay with a Ryzen 5 5600, and not all gamers require a Ryzen 7 5700X or better.
Yeah, and I think with the sort of background tasks discussion, I guess, is that, first of all, some background tasks don't really utilize resources that are used for other things. So playing back a YouTube video, often that will be hardware accelerated onto your GPU's video decoding, which, while you're playing a game, is most likely doing nothing. So if it's using part of the resources that aren't being used for something else, like that case, you most likely won't see a performance deficit in any area to your CPU or GPU performance. Now, of course, there are some exceptions where you may be playing a super high resolution video, or you're not necessarily running on YouTube using a different playback app or whatever. But I'm just sort of providing an example there. And the second thing as well is that Windows is designed to be used with multiple applications running at the same time. If you open your task manager, you will see thousands of threads running. You'll see lots of other stuff that's not typically classed as like a background task. It's like the Windows search, utility, and the Windows, firewall. All these things are running as background tasks as well. And Windows is designed to properly manage all of these tasks. So, and now it doesn't do a perfect job of this all the time. There is certainly, if you're, say, rendering a video in Premiere and trying to play games at the same time, Windows is going to be like, both these tasks need all of the CPU, so I'm going to have to do some prioritization.
And there's certainly other bottlenecks in the pipeline as well that
of course
can't be avoided.
So often, for example, when I'm rendering a video and I'm trying to edit in Photoshop at the same time, one or the other of those applications is going to suffer because Windows has run out of resources to manage. But in the situations where there are enough resources, generally speaking, Windows does a pretty good job of minimizing and parking applications that aren't used and allocating as many resources as possible to applications that need it. So when we're talking about all these light applications like running Chrome or Discord or RGB utilities, yes, if you run 20 RGB utilities...
I was going to say, we should be careful with the RGB utilities. Some of them can be terrible.
Well, I think you need to split it up into... Okay, because some background tasks will cause performance issues because they're polling the performance of your system. And polling the performance of your system can cause a performance deficit. So if you're running hardware info, a lot of RGB utilities will poll like your CPU frequency and temperature. Polling those things can slow down your system. But if we're talking about apps where that's not as much of an issue, like Chrome, for example, or Discord or your favorite chat application or whatever it is, Windows can generally do a pretty good job of managing that in terms of parking it. And certainly you can probably just do some testing very quickly yourself of running a game with Chrome open in the background when you're not using it versus closing Chrome.
Yeah.
And it, generally speaking, makes very little difference to the performance of the applications that you're trying to use primarily. And that's because Windows does all sorts of things in the background. And on top of that, they're not particularly intensive applications. So if you've got any spare CPU resources, Windows can just be like, well, use those spare resources. It's only once, as we've talked about, you get to those high utilization situations where you may run into a few issues.
Yeah, people bring up, I think streaming was mentioned there. So very few people are seriously looking at streaming while they game. That's still very much a minority workload. But yeah, look, and again, if you're streaming, you're not really, and you're doing it seriously, you're not doing that on the computer you're gaming on, because it's always going to be a bit horrible unless you're using, the GPU to do the heavy lifting. And even then, there'll still be a performance penalty. If you're serious about streaming, you'll just have a second, less impressive computer to do all of the hardware encoding.
Yeah, and I think
for the stream.
Streaming is a bit of a different discussion as well, because you're no longer talking about main task plus light/irrelevant tasks.
Yeah.
You're talking about main task plus main task.
Yeah.
You're using your CPU for two very intensive things. And as we've talked about just literally seconds ago, using two heavy tasks at the same time, something has to be sacrificed there.
Yeah, and again, even like if you have a 64-core Threadripper system, which we do have here, and you encode a video on it, you can open up a game and play on it to a degree, but it's not, because you have 64 cores, it doesn't mean you can play like Warzone and have a smooth experience, because you maybe only need 8 cores for there. It'll still run pretty garbage. It can be done, whereas on other systems it can't be done at all.
Yeah, because the memory controller might be being utilized to 50,
Exactly.
60%, and the game might require extremely low latency.
And basically you get a poor result for both things, because the video encode ends up taking 3-4 times longer than it should have, and the gaming experience is pretty horrible. So again, it's kind of like the streamer thing, right? If you're a professional video editor or whatever, you'd have a system for doing that. And while it's encoding, if you've got some downtime, you want to play some games, you do that on a gaming system.
To summarize this discussion, because I think we've been going on this question for quite some time, but we do see the question a fair bit. It's, first of all, it's complicated. There's lots of different scenarios at play. And I think that the things most people are interested in is sort of with those lighter background tasks generally don't impact performance that much. And I'm sure you will go ahead at some point in the future and properly look and benchmark these sorts of things and, see what the case is. But I'd be surprised if you saw Chrome, for example, or Discord significantly affecting, even by just a couple of frames per second,
Discord
games.
Chat with friends in particular. If your argument is, I got the 5700X over the 5600 because I have Discord open in the background, absolutely wrong. You do not need that. And the only reason you get the 5700X, I listed the reasons in the video really, is because you play a lot of intense online multiplayer games that heavily utilize the 5600, and you will get a bit of extra performance there by going the 5700X. But that's not everybody. So we're not arguing for you must do this or you must do that. It depends. And we went through all the scenarios where one person would want one version or you may want the other version. And it's that simple. But throwing in background tasks like Discord to sort of throw a spanner in the works, no. It just doesn't use enough CPU.
There's other background tasks where you can make a case for, but I think something like that probably not.
You don't need E-cores, for example, for Discord, for Chrome.
And even if you did need E-cores, you'd need half of an E-core.
Sure. Not even. But anyway, let's move on to the next question.